Okay, before start today, let me give you an overview, what we discussed yesterday and day before yesterday, till now. For Sheshgiri, for you, I will share these videos, and you just go through them. And later on, if the same issues are repeated sometime, then we can can you please go on mute?
Hello, Gopi.
Hello.
We can't hear you. There's so many disturbances there.
Yeah, I guess I think Sheshgiri. Let me mute him.
That's fine.
Yeah. Okay. So yesterday we discussed about the one moment. You guys are able to hear me, right? Vinay and Shraddha.
Yeah, Gopi, now we can hear you.
I'm not sure.
Yes.
Sheshagiri, what about you?
I'm unable to hear your voice actually. I'm getting both that Vinay's voice and
But they are able to hear
your
my
voice is
voice.
very low.
Okay. Okay. Let's start. Yesterday we discussed about the investigate stage. So in that we have seen different types of reports, what type of reports we can generate, and the importance of each and every report. And we have seen few options also, when generating the reports, like advanced options, if we want, as per our requirement, we can select them, and we can see how it is changing in the reports. And day before yesterday, we have just seen the whole overall quality stage overview, um, what type of stages we have, and what is the importance of each and every stage, and few things we discussed about, the terminology what we are going to use in the quality stage and all those things. So yesterday, as I told you, we were discussing about the parsing. I'm going to discuss it separate, right? So because that is very important step which is going to be happen in the quality stage and the flow. So today I'm going to discuss about this parsing. Without parsing, the quality stage cannot able to identify what are all tokens coming in, and what are all the corresponding classification codes assigned for that. So you just remember, in yesterday's session, I just opened the token report, or the pattern report. So I'm just passing the name outside, out of this name, it is identifying what is the first name and last name, and what is the initial we are passing in that name field and all those things. So how it is identifying? First of all, if you look at the classification file, in that there will be three rows, three columns of data. One is like an input string, and the second column is an the standard abbreviation, and third column you can see the classification code corresponding to that. So you are seeing in the token report or pattern report, you are seeing classification codes F, I, L, or whatever it may be. So from where it is getting, it is going to the classification file, and it is identifying that. But in the classification file, you are not specifying the whole name. You are specifying the tokens there, JOHN or David or whatever it may be. You are specifying the tokens there, and then you are assigning the corresponding classification code for that, so that the policies can able to identify what is the corresponding classification code for this input stream, right? So now, if yesterday you are passing the name field, and it is identifying the corresponding classification codes, but in the classification file you define the only the tokens. So what exactly the process is happening is, whenever you're passing the name field, first of all it is doing the parsing on your input data. So once parsing is done, then it can able to identify what are all tokens are coming in. So once the parsing is done, it can able to identify the token. It can take this token and it can go to the classification file and it can identify, or it can set you hold the classification file and whether this particular token is presented or not in the classification file. And if it is presented, it will take the corresponding classification code. Otherwise, it will give you the default classification code. Okay. So on what basis it is doing the parsing? There will be somewhere right, like to do this parsing and to identify what all tokens are coming in your input data. So that will be taken care by this separation list and type list. Yesterday also, if you go and open the investigation stage advanced properties, you can see the separation list and type list. So this is the very important step, and this is the first step which will be going to happen in the quality stage flow. And once this is done, it will identify the corresponding tokens which are coming in your input data, and it will go and it will check in the classification file whether like this particular input token is presented or not. That is what the flow. So here you can see like a small description about the separation list and stripe list. You just go through them. Separation list is nothing but, so on what basis you want to like split your input data. For example, you are passing name, like first name, and then you are giving some space, and then you are passing some last name, and at the end you are giving some initial. So in between all these three, like in first name, middle name, and last name, you are passing space as a delimiter to separate like first name, middle name, and last name, or first name, last name, and initial. So in the separation list, if you specify space, then it will split your input name field into three different tokens. One is the first name and last name and then initial, right? Because you are specifying the separation list. Separation means it will do the separation based upon whatever the values you are giving as part of the separation list. And then stripe list. Stripe list means it will skip, or it won't consider that as a separate token. For example, on the based upon the space, you are dividing your input data into different tokens. And if you don't want to consider space itself as a token, then you have to specify that space in this type list. So basically, whatever characters you don't want to consider as a separate token, then those values you need to specify in this type list. So separation is nothing but based upon this value, it will try to separate your input data, or it basically try to convert your input data into tokens. And type list is nothing but whatever the characters we don't want to consider as a tokens, you can specify them. Okay. That is the separation list and type list. I will show you some examples so that you can easily understand, and then we will discuss about the standardization uh, flow, like in the quad stage rule flow. um, these are the few examples. Let me go back. Yeah, you just go through these examples whatever they have given, you can easily understand like what is the separation list and what is this type list. So whatever the symbol you are seeing here, this is a kind of space, just assume that. And the dot or period I'm using as a separation list, and this type list I'm using the space. Then how many tokens are it is generating, and if I change any separation list and type list, how many tokens are it is getting generated, and if I change it again, how many tokens it is getting generated. We just see these examples, and if you have any queries or if you don't understand anything, just let me know. As I told you, separation list is nothing but it will try to use that those characters or whatever you have used as part of the separation list. Based upon that, it will try to separate your input data into tokens. And type list, whatever the characters you don't want to consider as a tokens, those characters you will specify in this type list. So just keep those 2 points in mind and look at these examples. And if you don't understand anything or if you have any queries, let me know.
Copy. In first example, there is separatist is space and dot, correct?
Yeah.
So it means it will be searched like as a space and dot.
Hmm.
So dot is
Individual
coming in token.
characters. Individual
Sorry,
characters. Space one time and
individual.
dot is one time. So it won't consider the combination.
Okay, so any one of will be the separate list, like is a space or dot.
Yeah.
So but dot is coming in. There is in the top. Okay, okay. Space. Okay. Sorry, I was confused there. There is a two separate list and strip list.
Yeah.
So what is in difference in both?
That's what I'm saying. In separation list, whatever the characters you are specifying inside the separation list, it will try to use those characters to split your input data into tokens. So in the first example, in the separation list, we have the space and we have dot. So in the example,
Okay.
we have 120 Main Street and NUW, right? So what it is doing, 120, after that you have space, then it is splitting that. And main it is considering as a second token. And again we have space, and again it is considering ST as a separate token. And dot, it is considering as a separate token, and again N and W and dot and all those things. Why it is not considering space is a token itself? Because in the stripe list I specified don't consider space as a separate token. So that is the reason why dot it is considering as a separate token, but space it is not considering as a separate token. Clear or still have any
Okay.
question?
So in separate list we have defined two types of there is space and dot. But in stable we have specified only we are giving as a space.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we directly we can't give it to strip list only. Yeah, we need to give the separate list. Then we'll
No,
provide that.
these two are the standard, and you should specify like this only. You cannot change it. So you tell me
Okay.
like why you want to change it.
No, suppose I want to add more in separate list, like as a space and white space, like as a five space. So that also I can add it in a separate list.
Five spaces you're saying, or
Yeah, five spaces.
don't need, right? Once you
Why?
specify the spaces at any point of time, how many spaces you are getting, that doesn't matter. It will add, it will consider it as a separate separator, or if you specify in this type list, it will try to remove all the spaces.
Okay, but like we have the requirement. There is a column have as five space. We are not considering single space. Single space will be become as a token.
Hmm.
So
So
in
in
that
that
case,
case, yeah, tell me.
yeah. So in that case, only white space we need to as a take it as the separate established, and space will be as a part of the token. It will become in the middle of the string also.
Hmm. Middle of the, see, that is what I'm saying. If you specify in the middle of the string, that is again depends on how you are going to specify your separation list and strike list. So space in quality stage, generally you will not consider it as a separate token. There is no meaning for the space, even if you want to consider it as a separate token, right? So basically, the value which you are getting, that is the that is going to be play a major role in the quality stage. So even if you are getting five spaces, or if you want to consider seven spaces as a separate token, then what is the meaning of that? Like again at the end it has to go and check in the classification file, right? Whether this particular token is presented or not. In the classification file, you are going to specify space as a separate token. No, right?
If we'll specify there as a space is a special token.
No, what is the use of that? I'm saying that is what.
See, we have the requirement like R delimiter R is a five space, is a white space is a five space. We have the delimiter as a five space.
Hmm.
So we are separating by the five space. And if space will become, that is a part of the as a string also.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't want to lose that as space.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to separate like with the. So if I will
You are
give it
saying,
as a
one moment, let me understand it. You are saying five space is your like column separator. You're saying,
yeah,
right?
yeah, can you
Like,
make it in the notepad so I can give it to better?
yeah.
Like we have two columns A and B. Okay, whatever will take it, two column.
Okay, five spaces you're
This
saying,
is a
and then you are getting another value.
yeah, and take it the one more as a record down.
Okay.
Anyone is the first one. Take it anything
Okay.
and five is space.
Mm-hmm.
Then take it a X
Mm.
space Y.
Yeah, this is what I'm
This is a
saying.
valid record.
How will you handle this in our data stage? If you are, see, once you are getting your space, like in data stage, just assume like you are expecting the pipe delimited, and in between the data also you are getting the pipe. Okay, so how will you handle that in data stage?
So we will take as a delimiter the five space.
Mm-hmm.
So once five space will become, then only it will become as a delimiter. Otherwise, other than it will become as a record and column.
Did you try this
So I
in
think it,
data stage? I'm not sure because it.
yeah, yeah, it will work. It will work.
Mhm. Okay, fine. Then here in quality stage, there is no
Mm.
specific thing like specify five spaces considered as a, what I can say, tokens or whatever it may be, because you cannot specify duplicates inside this one,
Okay.
this operation distance type.
Double.
So that won't be possible. You have to identify in some other way, and then you need to pass the data to this quality stage, because
Okay.
whatever the characters you are going to specify it here, so based upon those characters it will try to identify it. So once you specify space there, it will try to identify that, and it will split that, and then it won't wait for whether you have specified the other things or not. It will act as an individual. Once you specify the space, it will try to remove that, because
Okay.
separation list, whatever the characters you are going to specify, those are the individual characters. It won't check the combination. That's what I'm saying. If you specify five spaces, it won't consider five spaces combination there, because if it is working like that, if you specify a space and the dot, basically it has to check for the combination of space and dot in the your input data. That is not happening. What it will do is, it will treat space as a separate what I can say, separator list, and dot as a separator list. It won't check a combination of this one as a separator list. So in that case, even if you specify five spaces or six spaces, that doesn't matter. First of all, it will take the first token and it will go and check it here, and whether it is presented or not. Whether it is presented, it will simply separate your data. Okay.
Okay. Separateness will not allow as a duplicate.
Yeah.
Uh, okay. But this symbol is like is not a space. Something
Yeah,
is
that is what
different.
I'm
That
saying.
is
They have a representation purpose. They have given it like this. That is a space.
okay. That is space only.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think I don't know. Can we use the ASCII code for as a space here?
No.
No, no. Yeah. Okay. Okay. It's fine.
Yeah. Okay. So, you understand it, right? By these examples, how it is working. Separation list and stripe list. Any
Yeah.
any
Got it.
any others, if you have any queries, let me know. We will discuss here itself. Otherwise, we will move on to the flow, the execution flow of the quality stage rule set. Okay. Okay. Then let me go to the quality stage rule set. Is it clear for you, or do you want me to maximize it again? Just let me open this one. Yeah. Okay, so let's start about the execution flow, or we can say it as a flow chart of the quality stage rule set execution. So before this, let me give you an overview of the quality stage rule set. So we are saying we are going to do the standardization on the name, we are going to do the standardization of the address. We have different types of rule sets available in the repository. But if you go and open any one of the rule set in the existed rule sets, you can see that rule set is a combination of 5 components. So each and every rule set in the quality stage is a combination of the 5 components. Out of 5, 3 are mandatory components and 2 are the optional components. Even if you create your own rule set also, it will automatically add whatever the mandatory components we have, and optional if you want you can add it them. So even if you create your own rule set, or even if you are going to use your existed rule set, but the rule set is a combination of the 5 components, and 3 are the mandatory components out of 5, and 2 are the optional. Whenever you need, you just need to add them. Let me list out all those 5 components. So at the very first component is the classification file. Classification file, the extension of the classification file is .cls, that you can see it here. Classification file or classification table, that doesn't matter with what name you are calling it is, like whether it is classification table or classification file, the extension for that is .cls, and this is a mandatory component. And the second component is the dictionary file. So the extension for that, you can see it here, .dct. So this is also a kind of mandatory file again. And third component is pattern action file, .pat. So this is also a mandatory component. And two other components are you can see it here, reference tables and override table. So two tables we are seeing it here, right? Override tables and reference tables. These two are optional. Whenever you need, you just need to add them. Otherwise, you just no need to add it any data inside that. You can simply use your rule set. So basically, as I'm saying, the quality stage rule set is a combination of the 5 components: classification file, dictionary file, pattern action file, and two other optional components like override and reference tables or lookup tables. So each and every component has some importance and why we need in the quality stage rule set. So the execution flow, while we are discussing about the execution flow, I will show you how the rule set will work from starting to end point, and then I will take one small example, and I will correlate the example with this execution flow, so that you can get some clear picture like how the quality rule sets are working and how it is able to standardize your input data. Okay, so first of all, just assume that I have one input file. Whatever the input file I'm going to use it, I'm just passing that to the standardization stage. Okay, let's assume the same example, whatever we have used for the investigate stage, there we have used the name rule set, right, for our now what I can say for our example. So try to assume that that same input file I'm passing to the standardization stage. Here I have selected the name rule set. Whatever the rule set I have selected in this investigate stage, the same rule set I'm selecting it here. So even if you open the name rule sets also, you can see the same combination of the files: classification file, dictionary file, and pattern action file, and then two other optional components. So as I told you, at very first step, which is going to be executed in the quality stage, the entire standardization flow is the parsing. So how it is the quality stage will do the parsing, that is again depends upon the separation list and step list which you have mentioned inside that name rule set, right? So the parsing I'm saying, so For parsing, it needs the separation list and type list, where that separation list and type list will be present in the actual quality stage rule set components. The separation list and type list will always be present in the pattern action file. So at very step, like in the execution flow, it will execute the separation list and type list step, which you have mentioned inside the pattern action file. So the first component which will get execute in the quality stage flow or standardization flow is the pattern action file. Inside that pattern action file, whatever the separation list and step list you have mentioned, so that step is going to be executed at very first step before the actual standardization starts. Okay, so what is the importance of the separation list and type list? Just now we have seen with some examples what is the separation list and type list, and what is the importance of that. Basically, even if you pass the combination of words or into let's take the same example, name. You are passing the first name, last name, initial, or whatever it may be. You are passing all of them into through one single column, but it is doing the parsing, and then it is identifying what all tokens are coming in, and then it is going to identify what is the respective or corresponding classification code is presented in the classification file. So here it is just doing the parsing. So once the parsing is done, it can able to identify whatever tokens are coming in. So okay, let's assume it identified the tokens. What is the next step of that? It will take the tokens, let's assume for our example we are getting John David, let's assume in a single field. So I have done the parsing. So it able to identify John as a one token, David as a one token. Done. So this step is done. So now I have the quality stage tool set has two tokens, but it has to identify what is the classification code corresponding to those two tokens. So first of all, it will take the John and it will come to the classification file. In the classification file, we usually the classification file is nothing but the tokens and the corresponding classification codes we will mention in this classification file. So yesterday or while we were discussing about the investigate stage, I just opened the classification file. I have added one entry there, that is a combination, that is the standard syntax. You can see total three columns of data. One is like an input data and second one is the standardized data, and the third column you can usually specify what is the corresponding classification code for that. Okay, so here parsing is done, identified the tokens. It will take the token, it will come to the classification file, and it will check John is presented in the classification file or not. So it will search it. If John is presented, it will take the corresponding classification code for that. Let's assume in the classification file I have mentioned F as a classification code for the John. Then my output will be F, John and F. So because F we specified as a classification code for that. So done. For one thing, it is able to identify for one token, it is able to identify the classification file. And then the second step is it will go for the next pattern or next token which is available here. So David is also one of the token which is able to identify. It will take the David and it will come to the classification file, and it will search for David token which is presented or not in this classification file. Let's assume David is presented and the corresponding classification code is L. Then you will get the David and the corresponding classification code as L. So till here you identified, till here you are able to parse your data and you identified the tokens and you identified the corresponding classification codes which you mentioned in the classification file. So till here parsing is done, and the corresponding allocation of the classification code is done. And what is the next step? Let me tell you. If you see here the pattern action file here, so at very first step, before starting the actual standardization process, the pattern action file was accessed and the way the separation list and type list was applied on your input data, and it will identify all the tokens. And the next usage of the pattern action file is here. Once you are done like with the identification of the classification codes, then the next usage will be here in the third step in the patterns, right? So patterns are pattern actions. PAT is nothing but pattern action table or pattern action file. So what exactly will be there in the pattern action file? So yesterday, while we are discussing about the investigate stage, we have generated the pattern report. So basically, pattern report is nothing but it will take the input value and it will give the what is the corresponding pattern which is identified for the particular input stream, right? So to identify the pattern, first of all, it has to do the tokens, and then it has to identify the corresponding classification code which was assigned for that, and it will club all of them. It will identify what is the pattern for that particular input stream, right? So here also for John David you are getting John, for John you are getting F, for David you are getting L. So what is the pattern for your input stream? For John David, the pattern is FL, right? So that is what here the classification file will do. So out of this classification file, then the input, the data which was the result which was identified by the classification table, that will pass to the pattern action file. So what the pattern action file will contains? Pattern action file will contains, in the name itself you can see pattern action file. So there will be a number of patterns, and for each and every pattern they have already mentioned some kind of pattern action statements. So pattern action file always contains patterns and pattern action statements. So whenever your input data is matching to any one of the pattern, and it will try to execute the corresponding pattern action statements on your input data. Okay, so same thing, here you identified the pattern, and it will pass the data to this pattern action file. So this pattern action file, what it will do is it will just check whether the incoming whether the input pattern is presented or not in the whole pattern action file. If it is able to identify any one of the pattern which is matching to your incoming data, then the corresponding pattern action statements it will try to execute on your input data. So once the pattern action statements executed, then this is the actual step which is going to be identified which one is the the actual first name and which one is the actual last name, or what type of pattern action statements you want to execute. So the whole stuff is will get executed here. Okay, so the pattern action statements will do all the pattern action actions which you actually mentioned for that particular pattern, and it will give you the output. In the output you can see actually the standardized version of your input data. Okay, so then what is the importance of this dictionary file? Dictionary file is a kind of metadata. uh, let's take the same scenario. So you are just passing the name field to the standardization stage to do the standardization. But if you go and look at the output report which got generated by the standardization stage, you just pass the name field only, but in the output you can see around 8 to 10 columns which was extra added by this standardization stage. Those we will call it as a stage generated columns. Okay, so from where we have to specify it somewhere the metadata of that particular stage generated columns. So in the dictionary files, if you go and open the dictionary file, this is the file of metadata of in the stage generated columns. For name, it will add another around 8 to 10 columns. But if you go for the address, it will try to add around 14 to 15 columns. So for each and every rule set, it will add few extra columns along with your input columns. So this is the place where you are going to specify the metadata of those particular the columns. So about all these components again we will discuss while actually while we were discussing about the standardization rule sets and user defined rule sets and all those things. For now, just keep it in mind just try to understand the execution flow. Okay, so here in the pattern action statements, it will try to execute few of the action statements. While executing those action statements, it need few of the input columns, few of the columns, it will try to put the data, your input data after the standardization, it will try to put the data into the dictionary file columns. So actually, you are passing the name field. After the standardization, it won't keep the name again in the standardization name again in the same input column. So that is the reason why it will try to put all the columns in some other column which you have mentioned in the dictionary file. So in the output, you can see what is your input data and what is your standardized version of that particular input data. So you can see in two different columns, the input and the standardized version. So to put that standardized data into some other column, it need some metadata, or like you need to define it somewhere, like in what column you want to represent this standardization version of the data. So here is the file. You have to specify the metadata of your stage generated columns. And these overrides and reference tables are nothing but, like, if you want to look up the data, like, the incoming data, so you're just passing the name field, and the parsing is done, and then it able to identify whatever tokens are coming in, and then it is taking in the classification file, and it able to identify what the corresponding pattern action, or like the classification codes, and then it is going to the pattern actions. It will try to execute the corresponding pattern action statement. But after the standardization, if we want to do a lookup with the list of values, like let's take the phone number, and you are getting the phone number, you are doing like the all these steps, like classification file, and then you are coming into the um, pattern action file, and you are trying to identify the any corresponding pattern is presented or not. And before executing the pattern action statements, or while executing the pattern action statements, if you want to do a lookup with this input data into a list of invalid phone numbers, let's take, like, all tens, all eights, all sevens, these are all invalid phone numbers, right? So if you specify all of them into a file, and if you want the incoming data, if you want to do a lookup with this list of values, then you will go with the reference tables. So you have to add the reference tables, or lookup tables we will call it as, and you will specify reference table. Inside that reference table, you will specify all these 10 or 11, or how many you want to treat the phone numbers as invalid. You will specify all the list of phone numbers inside this reference table. And while executing the pattern action statements, you will just do a lookup with this reference table. And if your input data is present, if your input data is present in this reference table, then you will return an error message saying that this is an invalid phone number. Else you will continue with the other pattern action statements. So about this pattern action statements, we will discuss it, like, how we have to specify. We need to know some separate language if you want to specify anything in the pattern action file. That is pat language. We will call it as a pattern action language, PAL. So we should know about that. So we will discuss later on, like, how the what all the, like, the commands and statements we have in the pattern action language, while we are discussing about the actual quality stage rule sets. For now, the reference table is like, the use of the reference table is, if you want to do a lookup with a particular list of values, you should go with the reference tables. And overrides is nothing but, like, uh, the existed rule set. If it is treating like, John as a first name, and you want to override like, John as a last name kind of thing. If it is one or two, like, very minimal number of changes, you will go with this override option. You can specify, like, John, and by default it is giving it as F. Then you can go with the, if you override option, you can specify it as L. Then next time onwards, it will try to consider John as a last name, because you already override the default functionality of your rule set. So that is what the importance of the override tables. So now we have I'm saying, like, we have the 5 components of the rule set. One moment. So we have the 5 components of the rule set. Um, the first rule set, which is going to be executed in the execution flow, is like in this suppresses and parse type list, which you have mentioned inside the pattern action file. Once that is done, it will able to identify all the tokens, and it will take those tokens. It will go to the classification file. It will identify what is the corresponding classification code for that, and then it will, once the pattern identified for that particular input string, it will go to the pattern action file, and then it will check whether the patterns the pattern action statements are presented or not. If it is presented, it will try to execute the corresponding pattern actions which you have mentioned there. And while executing the pattern actions, if you want, you can do a lookup with the reference tables. If you specify the list of values, and if you want to do a lookup with the list of values, you can do that inside the pattern actions. And then once the standardization is done, it will try to put this standardized data into some other columns. We will call it as a stage generated columns. About that information, the metadata and all those things of those columns, we will specify in the dictionary files. So, and then once the pattern statements executed and it is able to standardize, then you will get in the output file along with the input columns and also the output fields, the stage generated fields. The stage generated fields basically you have to specify in the dictionary file. So for example, if you're passing name field, you will get around 8 to 10 columns. So those extra columns information you're going to specify in the dictionary file, and you will assign the values for these dictionary fields from the pattern action statements. So that we will see it later, while discussing about the actual rule sets. So now I think just try to understand the flow. What step is executing at the very first, and what is the next step, and what is the third step. So at least you should know about this flow of the execution. Otherwise, you cannot able to understand anything in the quality stage rule sets. Okay, so this is the flow. Let me try to take some example, and I will try to explain how according to this uh, flow, so that you will get some clear picture. And after that, if you guys have any queries, then we will discuss it later. Okay, let me take the example. Okay, let's consider this and compare this data or this input data into with this execution flow. So first of all, we need some kind of input, right? So that input is nothing but, let's assume, sorry, this is the string. Okay, this total string you are getting, 10 Maple Street apartment 222. This is an example of the address. So you just use the same execution flow and you can understand it. So for example, you are getting in your address line 1 or whatever it may be, if you are getting this information, 10 Maple Street apartment 222. Let's take for this execution flow, just consider this as an input. So from the input file, you are getting the address line information, and here you are trying to do the address standardization. So for you, the input is this one, this sorry, this 123 10 Maple Street apartment 222. And then, as per our rule set, what is the first execution step? The parsing, right? It has to identify what our tokens are coming in. Then here, go and check it here. Once the parsing is done, right, this is the pattern, you will get it here. So for 10, it is assigning cap symbol. This is again default classification code. Because why it is assigning the default classification code? If you go and look at your address rule set in the classification file, you never see 10, because these are all numerics. I think usually we will not mention about this. So cap symbol it is assigning, because it is able, it is once the parsing is done. Parsing is nothing but 10 is one token, Maple is one token, street is one token, apartment is token, 222 is one token. So total how many tokens? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tokens once the parsing is done. And then the next step, identification of the classification codes. Then come here, and the classification codes it is identified, cap symbol, question mark, T, U, and again cap symbol. So this is why it is giving T and why it is giving U here. So in the classification file for street, if you go and look at that, they will mention T, and for apartment they will mention U. So that is the reason why it is able to identify T and U. For other things, they didn't mention anything in the classification file, in the address classification file. That is the reason why you are seeing this cap symbol and question mark and all those things. So with the comparison of this execution flow after the classification, the output will be like this. This is the output from the classification file. This output, as I told you, once the classification file and the corresponding classification code identification is done, this data will go to the processing file, or the pattern action file. In the pattern action file, it will use the combination of the dictionary file as well as if there are any override tables and difference tables, it will try to use it here, and then it will do the actual standardization of your input data. So once the pattern action statements execution is done, then your output will be like this. What is the house number? See, while passing your input data, you are passing out of a single column, right? Let's take address line 1, you are passing the whole data, but in the output you can see house number is one of the column, street name is one of the column, street type is one of the column, unit type is one of the column, and unit is one of the column, right? So 1 2 3, these 5 columns data usually you can see in this dictionary file. So how we are getting house number value, and how we are getting the apartment value, and how we are getting this the other value, or whatever the street name value, and all those things are, this pattern action will be taking care of all those things. So while executing this pattern action statements, it will assign 10 as to the house number and 222 as a drive or information or whatever it may be. It will, the pattern action file, it will try to identify, it will try to place the, or it will try to populate the data for these dictionary files, but with the help of these overrides and the reference tables. So that is the reason why if you look at this data, and in the input you are passing as a single column, and it has identified 5 tokens out of it, and as a second step it has identified all the corresponding classification codes for those 5 tokens, and then the pattern action file will get executed. In the pattern action file, it will try to take the use of the dictionary file and other override files and reference tables if you specify any, and it will try to execute the pattern action statements, and it will identify what is the house number and what is the street number and street type, unit type, and unit. These are the stage generated columns. So from where, you will specify these stage generated columns. That is, again, if you go and look at the dictionary file, you can see these 5 columns. Okay, so this is how, the whole, even if you pass name, even if you are passing, the phone number or anything else. So this is the standard flow of the execution of your execution, or your quality stage rule sets. At very first step is, it will try to do the parsing, and once the parsing is done, it will try to identify the classification codes. Once the allocation of the classification code is done, the pattern action statements will get executed, and the pattern action statement will try to identify the standardized version of that, and it will try to put the data into this stage generated columns, and it will give you the output back. Okay, so that's that is it, the execution of the quality stage rule set, and along with some example. And if you guys are not able to understand it, let me know and we will discuss about it. So you have to be very clear about this execution of the rule set, and also the how the parsing is, and tokenizing is done, and all those things. So you should be very clear about that, and then we will try to take some standardization rule set, and we will try to execute and some of the data, and we'll see how the data looks like, and we will discuss about all those things later. For now, this is very basic, in the pattern action file and classification file and dictionary file, whatever the 5 components we have in the rule set, and along with the parsing, stripe list and separation list. Okay, so if you guys have any queries in this, just let me know.